From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's edition of the SDM Show, I'm really honored to sit down with my good friend Bob Dunn, BobWp. Bob is the producer of the Do the Woo podcast, and I thought I'd get Bob on again so we could sit down and talk about WooCommerce trends in the WordPress space. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast as Bob and I do the woo. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. Today I'm here and we're going to talk a little bit of WooCommerce with my good friend Bob Dunn, BobWp. How are you today, Bob?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be back here, Rob.
Yeah, it's great. It's always great to have you back. As we've said, I think we've known each other now going on 12, 14 years.
Oh, man, yeah.
But back in the days of the Headway days where I think we first met, and we've sort of stayed in touch, and it's always a treat to have you. Before we get to the podcast, most people know you as BobWp. You've been in this space a long time. What projects are you working on these days? Anything interesting?
It's I'm about almost a year now into dothewoo.io. So that's really my focus now. About obviously WooCommerce for those that don't know what Woo means, but yeah, I do a podcast on there. I do some news. It's a lot around the builder community. So I'm just kind of highlighting on that. Trying to bring people up that are in the space that kind of just for people to recognize all the cool stuff that's going on. So that's been my focus and been doing a lot of iterations of that. And right now I'm in the middle of a rebrand and a redesign of the site. I have an agency doing it, so it's all hands off for me, which is really nice. So I'm looking forward to that launch. I'm tentatively going to say early October, but you know how those things go. But we won't do a set date, but I'm looking forward to that. So I'm kind of deep into that and doing a little work on the content, just getting things all nice and tidy.
All too well. Dates like that tend to slide a little bit, and the worst part about it is people like us who have been in the web game, you in past, and we kind of look at things and say, really, do we really want to do this? And this is why our own sites always sit on the back burner until we get to it, right, Bob?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why this time it's so nice. They contact me. Oh, you want to look at this piece, this part? What about this? And I'm like, oh, this is so much easier, so.
Yeah, so let's jump on in. We want to talk WooCommerce. Do the Woo. What a journey it's been. You've been doing it for a year now. You've kind of, I would say, you're trying to get your co-hosts to do a little more, right? You're getting them on more, and you're sitting back and listening to all the good stuff. One thing I will say is you're so lucky. You've got a bunch of great co-hosts, and they all bring different stuff to the table and different areas of expertise, and they're all a treat to listen to. So that's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And I've been extremely lucky with who I've chosen because they've really connected well with each other, and they make the guests feel comfortable and the guests enjoy the show. So that's a really big piece of it. So I'm blessed when it comes to that group of volunteers.
Yeah, they're amazing. So let's jump into what we want to talk about today, and that's WooCommerce in general. So to get to a bit of an interesting discussion. WooCommerce doesn't really have a competitor in the WordPress space right now. There's competitors outside of the WordPress space like Shopify, which we know, but in the WordPress space, there isn't really a competitor. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? What's your take on that?
We all, you and I have been in business for a long time, so we know, competition is good. And when it's there, it's good. It's healthy, and when it's done right. But I don't really have feelings one way or another. It's like if somebody comes along and can think of something that can grab some of the market and it's appealing to people, it's like, oh, I'm all for it. I think it's a tough row. I've talked to a couple in the past that tried to enter the space, and some of them were, more just, they have their platforms and they want you to integrate it into their WordPress site. They built integrations. And I know from talking with them, they've had challenges entering the space. It's just been a tough row. They have their specialty and their audience and their customers, but taking a slice of that pie has been more challenging for them. And, I can't say why, because I'm not in that, in that position. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's not a question of whether it's good or bad. It's a question of who can do it and who can find that sweet spot, because, we're definitely not going to bail unless there's something that is, maybe you consider it simpler or easier to onboard, or it's more specific to your kind of product or the size of your store. So I don't think there's ever that barrier. I think at this point, for as long as WooCommerce has been around, what they built up in that space, it's a tough challenge for somebody. And I'm not saying nobody will ever, I say never. I'll never say never.
Yeah.
But, it'll be interesting to see if something slides in there, because, and you never know what's going to happen with WooCommerce. I mean, the directions they'll take over the years, and, if that will open up another opportunity for somebody down the road. So long answer to a very short question. I don't think it's necessarily, in the scheme of things, you think, oh, it's not good, there's not competition, but there must be a reason there's not competition, and somebody's got to figure out that reason and get their foot in the door if they want to, take any bit of a piece of the pie, and, even maybe from some of the smaller other ones that are not so much a direct competition like EDD and stuff. But, there's, maybe that's it. Maybe it's that niche kind of e-commerce type thing versus just this robust, we sell everything.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think Woo's biggest competition is probably Shopify, which is outside of the space. And I know from my client base, people either go to Woo or go to Shopify, and they have different reasons for going different ways, which leads me into my next question, which is always a controversy in the WordPress space. So I kind of want to touch on it. I like controversy.
Oh, yeah.
We have people who believe you shouldn't run an LMS inside WordPress because it's too resource heavy. We have people who believe you shouldn't run marketing automation within WordPress because it's resource heavy. So where this conversation is going is, why should we run Woo inside WordPress? Because isn't that resource heavy? Thoughts?
Yeah. I just, and it's interesting because a lot of the things I take in from WooCommerce, I'm not building sites with WooCommerce. I'm not working directly with clients. I talk to a lot of people that are doing it. So by osmosis, I hear what they're saying. And I think from especially the larger agencies that are looking at these huge, humongous stores, it always comes back to, if you do it right, it's not going to be resource heavy. You've got to know what you're doing. And that's like any technology. Now, that doesn't help the small person that wants to do something fairly large, because they may not understand that piece of it. So there's, some of the agencies I've talked to have built incredibly huge sites. And yeah, it's not the fact that you shouldn't do it, but you got to do it right. So that doesn't really help maybe the small shop owner. They may still be reluctant. They may think it's resource heavy. And, I can't say one way or another on that, but I think there's you and I both know there's a lot of variables. There's a hosting, there's other things that throw into the mix that you got to make sure you have in place. So yeah, it can be, and you can make it resource heavy by putting too much stuff in it, just like anything WordPress. I mean, WordPress your site can become very resource heavy if you do it wrong. So
yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I think one of the things where I think people miss out on is they go get awful hosting. And we've all been down that road. We've all made that mistake. And then they say, well, Woo's not running well. Well, if you get a hosting plan that has no resources for the size of the site you want, how are you supposed to make it run? Which leads me into another question. We're now seeing this big pop-up of managed WooCommerce hosting, not just WordPress hosting. How's your feeling on that? Have you played with any of those or heard any?
I know enough of them. I've not actually, my site has WooCommerce on it, but I sell so little, so I can't really be a fair judge of, yes, this really speeded up my site because of that fact. But I think it's cool. I think it's a good way for, these hosting companies, they're on the ball. They know what the heck they're doing. I mean, no matter what people criticize about, different moves they make or whatever. But yeah, it's an animal in itself. So why not build a hosting platform around that particular, the needs of WooCommerce, to make it the most effective. And, some of them are constantly adding, and a lot of them it's about performance. They're not always just saying, we're just making it for you can do all this cool looking stuff on it. It's really boils down to, and the serious hosts that are putting this together are looking at how do we always make sure that uptime, performance, speed, all those things are working. And that's their, and if you don't have somebody on your team, so to say, doing that, then you can be screwed, So there's that option. Okay, I have a little blog here. I can go have this host. I have, I'm selling 9,000 products. I can now go to them and feel more rest assured that they know what I'm dealing with versus the person that has a little blog.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of it is resources based on hosting and what you need. And there's a time to go to either a virtual server or a dedicated server, depending on the size of your site. And I think people need to realize that the cost of having a big site is paying for premium hosting and not the cheap $3 a month hosting we all see advertised to get you in the door. I think people need to, honestly, when it comes to hosting, wake up and realize your host is your partner in your business, not just the service you buy. And that's kind of been my take on it for years. So
yeah. And I was going to once do a video, and I had this wild idea in my mind that I was going to do a video going around shopping for a physical store, just like I would a online store. And I was going to be standing outside this old torn down building that has no windows in it and everything, and saying, maybe I can get this cheap. It's not going to cost me as much as that building in the middle of downtown. And so, it's that, yeah, you're gonna pay, get what you pay for.
Yep. Now let's jump on to Woo. Wasn't there recently a major security update for Woo in the last couple releases? And
there was. It was like what about? Oh God, what maybe about was it about a month ago? I think.
Month ago.
Yeah, and it's one of those. I don't know. Maybe I'm too even keeled. Now, of course, I don't have a huge store, so I'm not stressed about it. But I know that they did do a quick fix to it. They really moved on it quickly, which was, and this isn't, being biased or anything. I think that one was handled pretty efficiently, and just seeing the documentation they were putting out. Of course, there were some people that were, totally freaking, and I don't blame them. But yeah, security is a thing that I look at sometimes. I think, oh man, I'm so glad all I have to worry about is my site.
Yeah, I manage over 100 sites from a security perspective, and when you see something like iThemes yesterday, if you released their security report at the time of this recording, and they and there was 56 new security vulnerabilities and themes and plugins, not just Woo. I think there was a couple Woo ones on the list, if I recall, right? And this was in a 1 week period. And they used to produce this list every 2 weeks. And it's now gotten so bad they're doing it weekly, because the reality of it all is, as we go through this pandemic time, we're all at home working, but so are the hackers, and the hackers are bored. And I'll tell you, they're really bored.
Yeah, they don't, they're not going out and eating anymore or doing, strolling in the park. They're like, God, I'm stuck in my house. Why don't I just do a little bit more work?
Yeah, I truthfully, I've been beating this dead to a drum in the last while, a little selfishly, but a little, proactively too, is I think you need to have somebody who knows security in your corner, because if you don't, it's a bit of a problem, even more so with an e-commerce site. Like, I just don't think you can do it on your own anymore.
Yeah, I remember back several years ago, just on my blog, BobWp, I had a hack of some sort, and I can't remember, a bunch of messages came up and all this stuff. And I just looked at it, and, I could have you can search right away. You can go on Google, what happens when it says this or something. And I think I contacted Security or somebody. I contacted and said, you need to deal with it. It was like a 2 minute, and I'm maybe the rare case too, but it was like, I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to start, and I don't want to deal with it. So yeah, if something like that happens, I'm going to call somebody that knows what the heck they're doing.
Yeah. So this last week, I was resizing pictures for a client for a WooCommerce store, and I was resizing 249 pictures. I won't mention the client to save him, but his graphics guy gave me pictures, and graphics guys that aren't good with web don't understand that picture sizes have to be the same.
Oh, no.
and that's probably one of the bigger sites I've dealt with. I've got a couple Woo stores that are around 300. What's the biggest you've seen out there that runs really well?
Oh man, it seems like I can't remember. There was somebody that was on a show talking. It was in the tens of thousands. It might have been in the upper, like almost 6-digit. And sometimes when I hear that, it boggles my mind. One way or another, how they as a developer make it all work well for the client, and just there's so many parts of that just blow my mind. But yeah, I've heard ones that have above, in the 6 figures, and yeah, it's more common than I think. Sometimes I'll see a lot of people, coming in, oh, I have 70, 80,000 products. I'm like, whoa, okay, this is like, and they talk like it's just every day. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's pretty large site. So let's jump in. I think one of the biggest problems or biggest issues with Woo isn't Woo itself, it's how sites are developed. And I think the big problem is the checkout process. And you kind of know where I'm going with that. If anybody's ever shopped on Amazon, the checkout process is really easy. It's bing bang, you're done. And I think Woo needs to, or developers need to move more to a one-step checkout process. Do you have any thoughts on the checkout process?
Right now it's like, I love this word. I think Carrie Deals used it once somewhere. She's in the WordPress space for those that don't know her, but there's a plethora of checkouts coming out now, plugins. Yeah. I mean, it is the thing right now. I've talked to several of them, a lot of them are the one-click checkouts. It's a big, huge topic right now. And I just talked with somebody from Iconic WP, and they're doing it. They're going to be releasing a new checkout plugin for easier checkout. And so I hear that a lot, and it's a constant thing. And it's obviously needed, and people are doing it left and right. And it's been happening for a while, but it seems like there's, over the last maybe half a year or 6 months or a year, there's been a lot of them popping on the scene. So it's obviously a need. And that's what's cool about it. I mean, WooCommerce does its thing. It's got plenty baked into it, But, these people are coming up with this other stuff that, hopefully will help merchants, store owners, even developers, make their client sites faster. So yeah, I definitely see it happening, and I think we knew it was coming, that people would jump on the bandwagon and find some ways to solve that solution, or solve that problem, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and payment processing isn't really a problem like with Woo, because Woo interfaces with PayPal, Woo interfaces with Stripe. Believe it or not, Woo even interfaces with Square. There is a Square plugin for those who don't know. I've used it. It's easy to set up from a developer standpoint. I have a client who's an insurance association, and they do all the renewals through Square. That's what they ask for. And we use the Square plugin out of Woo to do that. It's easy. It's a no-brainer. I mean, and so I don't think payment processing's the issue with Woo, isn't it? Like,
no, and they started their own, the Woo Payments, WooCommerce Payments, built on Stripe, and I switched to that, and it actually was, I mean, I was amazed at the onboarding for it. It was the easiest thing. I've set up payments on my site for 10 years, different things, and it was the easiest onboarding, quick. Bam, it was done. It was like, whoa, that was almost too quick and too scary. Is it going to work? So, they're even entering the space with that, which is, it's just another option, So I have Woo Payments and PayPal on my site, because those are the two that typically people, and so it's basically kind of like Stripe and PayPal.
Yeah, and then some time ago with Woo, there used to be an all-in-one developers bundle that developers could purchase, and they sort of did away with that in the last year. Do you have any thoughts on if that has hindered development, if it's helped development, if it's given people more options? Like,
I think when they do things like that, and we've had a couple of people on the podcast talking about the marketplace that actually run the marketplace on WooCommerce. I think it's always a bump in the road when you make any changes to any kind of, product subscriptions and stuff like that. I don't think it really hindered. It's really easy to buy a bunch of stuff that maybe you don't need at Woo. I mean, and maybe that's the case. Maybe developers are, I don't know. I haven't really heard a lot of feedback, but I'm kind of guessing developers, store owners, both sides, whoever, are looking at, okay, yeah, bundles are great, but often do bundles really, can you find that perfect bundle? Is it tough? And I think that's on the marketing side. If I have these 6 plugins, what if I only need 3 of them? Well, is it worth getting the 6 because maybe it's a better deal? But do I really need those other 3? Are they just, so there's a lot of, bundles are kind of interesting to put together, because who can really, I mean, especially Woo is so, God, there's so many variables of what you need, little different pieces and stuff, which is another thing too, which, can be good or bad.
Yeah, and I would agree. I know from my standpoint into buying plugins or paying for developers versions, I prefer to do one-offs and just get what I need, because I don't like getting in that model where I'm buying 6 because I might use the 4th one, but then I don't, and it costs me more money. And so but it's kind of the cable TV subscription model, right? You buy 20 channels and you watch 5 of them, but if you try and buy those 5 on their own, they cost you more than the 20, right, Bob?
Right. Or they package something on Amazon. Oh, this product comes with this little extra thing. That's kind of cool. And you get it and you think, what in the world am I going to do with this? And it ends up in a drawer or something. And you think, oh, yeah, I guess it wasn't worth that extra buck.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that. My mom had me order her a flagpole for the cottage. We have a family crest on a family flag that we had done. So, and what comes with the flagpole, and this is shipped from Amazon.ca, and this isn't meant to be derogatory, an American flag in the bundled in the box. And like, what is that going to do? Something?
Yeah, really? Oh, geez. Oh, man.
So it will go to one of our American family, but that's just another example.
Yeah. That's kind of a bizarre assumption, huh? That's wow. I'm going to use it for a dust cover for my computer screen. No, I'm sorry. That's terrible to say, but what can I say,
Yeah, I know.
You got to
So
get practical.
yeah, so let's go on to acquisitions. Back in, was it November, December, that Woo bought Mail Poet, and we all know about that acquisition. And there was big concern at the time in the Mail Poet community. I should say I'm a Mail Poet user, have been for a long time, and the reason why there was concern in the Mail Poet community was at the time they were running a deal on AppSumo, an LTD. So people were worried, would Automatic, the parent company to Woo, honor that deal or not? To give Automatic a lot of credit, they have honored it, and they've maintained they're going to honor it. So that's not an issue. What do you think about that acquisition, purchasing MailPoet?
I had somebody on. It was interesting because I had somebody on the podcast, actually one of the team members. She was in the marketing. And, the acquisitions overall, I guess, it's strange because nothing really surprises me. I think there's always, everybody's going to have a little concern, especially if you have some, skin in the game, you're using the product and you're wondering what's going to happen. And that particular one, I think is a real smart move on WooCommerce. I mean, yeah. As far as that's an ideal thing, and how they end up using that along the way or down the road, and how, obviously MailPoet, but I thought it was actually more interesting to hear from her as an employee, her experiences, because, even she was very blunt to say that for the team, it's scary when you're suddenly told it's going to happen. And that's another whole side of the thing. It's not even the customer side of things. But, I don't really feel any differently about that one than I do any other one that's happened, of the dozens of them that have happened lately. And I look at all of them as WooCommerce, not WooCommerce, WordPress, WooCommerce, whatever you say. Hey, it's finally maturing. We're entering the world of normal business, where people build wonderful products and you're able to sell them because they're incredible value to somebody else, which is like, I'm sorry, for me, it's like, duh. So, I think there's been a couple that have affected me directly. And I think for a moment, is something going to change? And I won't jump on jump the gun and assume something will. So I'll research it and listen to them, and yeah, maybe something. I mean, Yoast just did it, and I've been using Yoast for 10 years. And that was another, that's another one. And everybody, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just keep using Yoast, and maybe someday I may not use Yoast for one reason or another, and life will go on.
Yeah. I think Yoast is a what do you call it? For me, it's become a don't go to issue because of who bought them. To be honest with you,
yeah,
I don't think it's that at all. Yeah. So there's that. What do you see coming down in the WooCommerce space in the next while?
Oh boy, I ask this a lot with guests because, for me personally, I never know. I'm like, I've gotten along for the ride, and I'm trying to think of what some guests have said. I think they're just, they're just seeing more. The growth, obviously, during COVID, there was that growth. So we're seeing more, people get online, whether they're sticking with it, that's another question. I know that some have mentioned VR and AR with WooCommerce, that they see potential there, and how that works in. I'm not exactly sure, but I've heard some really cool things that are being done in that space. We talked about checkout, which is, huge. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just, it's an ever evolving space, e-commerce. And, I even when people used to ask me, what do you see happening with WordPress, 2 years from now? And I'm like, whoa, I can't even think of what's going to happen with WordPress 2 weeks from now, So it's, yeah, I don't know if anybody really, I mean, we can make predictions and assumptions and stuff, but it's obviously, I think the biggest thing, and the checkout is a prime example of it, is making everything easier and smoother for the customer. I mean, that's what's going to be constantly as more and more people are online now. It's just going to be more and more important to make that whole experience as smooth and easy as possible to make people spend money. And I think everything revolves around that and always has.
No, I would agree with you. I think the maturity in the space is going to keep growing. I think there's a lot going on. I think it's the reality that WordPress as a whole, not just Woo, is over 40% of the market right now. The space is maturing. I think it's going to get rough for the small time developer who wants to create that one niche plugin. I personally do, with all the consolidation going on at the plugin space. I think that's the biggest issue at this point, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's, for the builders, the developers and stuff, it's going to be, yeah, it is. It's finding, I mean, a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon in the last 12, 16 months to start developing WooCommerce sites because, yeah, well, it was kind of like a no-brainer. Everybody wants them, so why don't I start doing them? But it is finding that market. I mean, that's a challenge. And I get contacted daily by new people new products coming out, plugins and stuff. And these poor developers are just saying, how do I get this out there? And I'm like, I wish I had the magic bullet for them to, I could say in one line, do this, and you'd magically just become success. But it's a unique community, and we were talking about it before the show, how this community kind of works in the deeper parts of the community for those that are involved in that. And there is a lot to be said to get to really know these people and start building that trust. And I think that will go, that can make or break a lot. And a lot of guests I've had on that are builders, and as they get into this space and they're making recommendations to others, is, well, first of all, it's always a standard, find a need, make a solution, which is pretty much, that's I want to say a given, but it's also getting to know the community and starting to build that trust and getting to know people, and that can go a bit longer ways as far as people starting to recognize your product more or your services if you're doing sites. So it's not right now. I had somebody on that was Brad Morrison from BobWp, and he said that currently it's really tough to get good developers for WooCommerce.
Yep.
And he said he doesn't see that changing anytime soon. There's plenty of people that will say they will do WooCommerce, but to really find good, solid developers has been a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So true. Do the Woo is one of my favorite podcasts. You know that. And
Thank you.
Not just saying that because you're on. Always enjoy learning from the guests, or learning from you, or learning from the people in the community. Where can people find that podcast if they're interested?
Yeah, just go to dothewoo.io. Search it. You'll find it on all the good platforms, Apple Podcasts, all the normal pod platforms. So yeah, you can search it, Do the Woo there, or just Google it, go dothewoo.io directly. And, and if you Google BobWp, you'll end up on Do the Woo some way or another as well. But that's a little easier to remember. But I think people kind of tend to think of Do the Woo and remember that because it just sounds very musical.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me on, Rob.
Bye-bye. A very special thank you to my good friend Bob Dunn, BobWp, for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. Make sure you check out Bob's amazing podcast, Do the Woo, to learn all about WooCommerce and more. Thanks for listening to the SDM Show. The show is a production of Stunning Digital Marketing, and all rights are reserved. Rob can be reached by email at vip@stunningdigitalmarketing.com, on Twitter at Rob Cairns, on his website, stunningdigitalmarketing.com, and on his website there's links to all his social media platforms. This show is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.